I think we lose connection to ourselves because we are a society that's built on external validation, external guidance, right? It's not about what you say, it's about what your parents say. It's not about how you feel, it's about what society feels, right? And tells you is normal and okay and acceptable. So I think the work of reconnecting to ourselves is important, whether you're a parent or not. I think this is our journey as humans, is to come back to what that original version of intuition and self is.
Hello, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of The Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your destination, your oasis to be all things just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And today, my friends, mamas, this one's for you because we are braving motherhood. Have you ever had one of those feelings where, you're with your kid or maybe kids and you're like, I love my babies. I love them so much, but I miss me. I miss me. I miss all of the things that I could do by myself. I miss who I was pre-kids. Well, you are not needing to do it all alone. You just need the newest book by licensed therapist Vanessa Bennett, which is The Motherhood Myth. And I'm talking all of the things that we do in motherhood, like self-sacrifice and, being the martyr and thinking that we're going to get this like external validation or another trophy or award or an accolade. If you've ever felt that, or maybe you're struggling right now, this is the episode for you. This is for all of your mama friends. So go ahead, share it in the PTA group, the WhatsApp group, the line if you're in drop off. This is the episode to tune into if you're watching this on YouTube. Go ahead and click subscribe. Let's get into it this week with my dear friend, Vanessa Bennett, on her newest book, The Motherhood Myth, on the Brave Table. Well, hello, Queen.
Hello, Neeta.
Oh
Thank you
for
having me.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, there's so much to unpack. Just the title of your book itself gives it all away. But can we just start there?
Yeah.
Why the title specifically, The Motherhood Myth?
So there was two reasons why I landed on that title. I think first, because I realized that we are all functioning under so many myths around motherhood that are not ours. They're inherited, right? And they are just that, they're myths. But also my background is in depth psychology. And so much of what we do through the lens of depth is really look to the language of the unconscious, which is story and image and metaphor and myth. And so really reclaiming myths as essentially the maps to understand this path, this journey, this exploration of life. And almost like reclaim them from kind of where they've gone down this like commercialized route, the Disney route,
Yeah.
and they don't really give us actually the tools that they were meant to give us when they were first kind of created and passed down. And so those two avenues kind of came together and became the motherhood myth.
So when we think of kind of being in the throes of motherhood, let's unpack, this, because I feel like, you say a lot in the book, we're not meant to do this alone. We're not meant to do motherhood alone. But yet I feel, and even just recalling my time as a mom of just my son, it felt super lonely. It felt like, oh, you're not supposed to share that you're having trouble breastfeeding, or you're not supposed to share that, oh, you almost like popped a stitch, doing too much, or was I supposed to do too much? Or, so all of these things, but why is it so baked into our identity as a woman, that particular statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so the book in general, I really stand by this idea that we need to understand how we got here first and foremost, before we can then start to unravel it and move forward, right? So a lot of this book is an anthropological deep dive into how we got here. And to kind of build on what you're talking about, like I have an entire chapter where it's the loss of the village, right? And I go back to the kind of creation of what we're now living in, which is this very lonely, very isolated way of living, of parenting, of mothering, right? And I talk about this concept of bringing women inside. the kind of very calculated, very strategic way under patriarchy and capitalism that we brought women into the home and isolated them there. So, starting back when we started farming and owning land that way, all the way up to the creation of the nuclear family, which was created. It's not natural for us to live and parent and love in these like two people systems.
Yeah.
Right. So we live in this perpetual state of shame around, am I doing this right? Why is this so difficult? Right. And that's really the overarching myth, actually, is that if you're not completely fulfilled by it, and if you're not doing it, air quote, right, that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a myth. It's not that there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the systems that have been created to make you feel like you're doing it wrong.
Right. You're doing it wrong.
Yep.
That you have to do it alone.
That's right.
That there is this badge of honor if you're doing it alone, and like you're doing it well or not well, but you're doing it alone, and that's the biggest thing.
That's right.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We recently moved, our family across the world, to the east of Dubai, and it's so different there. And the whole reason, one of the reasons why we moved there is to be closer to my husband's side of the family that's from India. We wouldn't really live in India, but and it's so different. In the 6 months that I've moved there, there's such a collectivist environment. And there is also this sense of a lot of support. Now, fine, you can have hired support, and that's what a lot of people do, which I know it's really looked down upon here in the States, but also, the family support. Right. And the family support of, dropping everything to be together. We have so many people in the house, so much. That it's just, children just coming in from the neighborhood, and I'm sure that's how a lot of us grew up, right? But like, you have now your nuclear family, and sometimes, you don't even say like, okay, the people are across the street, they're strangers, like, so then we're just isolating ourselves. Right. And over there, it's like just the complete opposite. The doors are open, whatever you need. And that was the biggest thing that I've noticed. And so what do you say, to that? Because I know obviously in a lot of the Asian cultures, it is the complete opposite. And during motherhood, that is the time to mother the woman.
Yeah. When I read years ago, I think when my daughter was maybe a year old, I read Michaeline Doucleff's Hunt, Gather, Parent, right? And that was one of the books that really blew my mind. And I started doing more research, and I started understanding more this concept of what we call weird parenting. Okay. The acronym WEIRD, right? Okay. So Western, educated, individual or industrial, rich, democratic. Okay. And how that
weird.
Impacts,
I like that.
Yep, okay. How that impacts the way we view ourselves, our families, our parenting. Now, what's really interesting is that I'm going to quote this wrong. It's like 97% of psychological research is done on people of European descent. And European descent only makes up about 12% of the world population, right? So it's this belief that we have here in the West that the way we do it is the way it should be done, or is the way it's done everywhere, which could not be farther from the truth, right? And so this concept that we have here in the West of like, oh, time's gone by. There used to be this collectivistic way of raising children and being in community. It's not time's gone by. It exists in other parts of the world right now. It just doesn't exist here, right? And it's on purpose. And I think that's a really important thing for us to understand. And also this idea that we as mothers do need to do it all. When you look at more collectivistic cultures, I think the percentage is like the biological mom does 30% of the child rearing in a collectivistic culture. 30%, right? The rest of it is done by the aunties and the cousins and the uncles and the grandmas and the grandpas, right? And here it's like 90-something% is done by the biological mother.
It's insane. And, we were just having a conversation with my mother-in-law the other day, and she's like, you guys spend so much time with your kids.
With your kids. I know.
And even to my husband, it's traditional, patriarchal. And she was like, I never remembered us spending that much time with you guys. And it's like, oh, why would you say that? And so, she's right. They lived in a very communal home. There was 23 people in his home, and everyone's kid it's not like you're the cousin. It's everyone's kid is everybody's kid. And it's like there are 6 kids living in that home of 23. So one of the aunts will and so there was just like this shared burden where I feel like, and I remember literally in the throes of that. I remember we were in LA at the time my son was being born, and I would push her away because I'm like, oh, I
got this.
Yeah, I got this. We're in the West. I got this. Trying to do all of the things. I did not have it. I was going through severe postpartum, and I realized I pushed her away because, there was some of my own stuff, but like, how often as women do we push other people away and help away because we feel like we're a burden, because we feel like, oh my gosh, are they going to think less of me? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to think I'm weak? So it's all of these like perceived things. And where is that, rooted in?
I mean, look, if we think about the fact that so long as women and mothers are in a perpetual state of doubting themselves, looking external for that validation, in a shame spiral around not being enough or being too much, right? Which essentially is just 2 sides of the same coin. If we're completely consumed by that all the time, we're far too busy and far too exhausted to question the systems in place to keep us that way, right? To question, am I actually satisfied? What does my soul actually want from this life? Is this really all there is, right? Question why. So when we ask ourselves, like, why is it like this? Well, it's like this because it benefits a very small percentage of people at the top of these systems, these dominator models, right, of society. And it keeps the rest of us kind of in our place, which is on a hamster wheel, which is constantly dissatisfied. We're so busy trying to put food on the table, we can't think of anything else. We're so consumed with shame that we're trying to hide our reality, and we're not speaking up and having honest conversations with people and saying, like you started earlier, the conversations I have with my friends in the very beginning, I love my daughter. I don't love parenting. They're very different things, but people are like, oh, you said what? Yeah, I said what I said. Would I love parenting if we were in a culture like what we're talking about? Yeah. Who's to say, right? It could be very different.
Oh, so different. I'm living it right now.
You're experiencing it. Yeah.
Living it right now. Yeah. Well, let's talk about this whole, the martyr mom and this like martyr syndrome of, mothering here is like very self-sacrifice and I've done everything for you. But then there's this like low key resentment and that builds and builds and builds. And at the end of the day, who does feel that? Are we then passing down that trauma to our children?
Yes, we are. 100%. Yes, we are.
This like passive aggressive, like I did all of this for you, well, actually you could have asked the other women here for support. Why do you think we still romanticize the martyr mom, and what toll is that really taking on our mental health?
Well, it's kind of a cultural archetype of mother, right? It's instilled in us from every angle. Again, societally, culturally, even in the kind of archetypal feminine forms that we look to, religious forms, spiritual forms, right? Not in their original form, but in the form that has kind of become who they are through, again, the lens of patriarchy. Yeah. I have in every chapter, I go into either a myth or a specific feminine form, archetypal form. And in the chapter where I talk about martyrdom, I actually talk about the image of Mother Mary. Yeah. And how Mary has essentially been, the Mary that we know today has essentially been curated and created via, the vehicle of multiple mythic women, feminine forms, right, over the years, goddesses, things like this that have come to be who she is now. But the lens of the martyr was very specifically crafted, actually, through the patriarchal church. And I think this chapter is going to get a lot of heckles raised, but it's really questioning, why are we being taught to martyr ourselves, right? And again, it goes back to this idea of like, well, if I'm constantly chasing this version of external validation, then I'm never going to look around and go, this is bullshit. And I'm not actually satisfied and I'm not actually fulfilled. And it could be more than it is. Right. And so when you were saying, is it passed down? Yeah, it is passed down. And this is not to blame mothers. It's really not. Again, we're set up this way in this system.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But I know for sure, having a mother who was exhausted, single parenting, stressed out all the time, right? I know for me, I internalized that. My entire life, I believed that it was my fault, that if I had never been born, she would be happy, she would be fulfilled. And she never said those words to me.
Right.
But that's the energy that we take on as children. Children are inherently egocentric. They believe that it is about them because they don't understand the concept of like the different egos. You're a different person than I am, right? Until they're much older. And so in the beginning of our lives, we start to develop this idea that it's my fault. Mom is stressed out. It's my fault. Mom hates her life. Mom's not satisfied. It's my fault. And they don't ask to be born, right? We bring them into this life. We put all of this pressure on them to be our everything, to fulfill us, to be our reason for living, which is not fair.
Right.
And then we don't understand why they grow up and they have these feelings of not being enough, not being good enough, right? And it comes hand in hand.
Yeah. And I feel like, then where and how, are you then repairing, and I feel like that kind of just sets you up for this, this dichotomy of then we're just passing it down to the next generation.
Right. And when you say, how do we repair? I mean, so much of, I say in this is not a parenting book.
Right.
I'm very clear about that,
Yeah.
Right? Because this is about us. It's not about our children. And when we say, how do we repair? I mean, I think what we start doing is we start living and we start challenging the nonsense that we've been told that choosing ourselves is selfish, that following and looking into our passions and our evolution is selfish. We start to realize that our children only live as big and as full as we allow ourselves to live, right? Children learn by what they see, not by what they hear.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if I'm over here verbally telling them, you can be anything and listen to yourself and be brave, all these things verbally. If I'm not actually living that, that's what they're going to see and that's what they're going to emulate.
Right. And that full embodiment of the aliveness of
right.
you as a mom.
That's right.
And so, you've worked with so many women who quietly suffer inside of their quote unquote perfect lives. And what are the hidden signs that someone has lost herself in the performance of, motherhood and probably doesn't even realize it?
I mean, I think there's probably a lot of signs that I've come to recognize. I think this is the part of my work where it starts to cross over into, I think, probably my work here on this planet, which is around codependency recovery.
Yes.
And so whether we're talking about motherhood, whether we're talking about partnership, whether we're talking about familial relationships, relationship with self, right? As a society, codependent ways of relating are really the ways that we think, it's like what we think love is in this society. I always say we're a codependent society. I hear all the time, well, my partner's codependent. And I'm like, that's not how it works.
Okay.
So are you. We all are.
Yeah.
And again, it's not on purpose. It's not, something that's wrong with your character. It's the way that we're raised. And so what we're raised to believe is I'm nothing if I'm not partnered. I'm nothing if I'm not chosen. I'm not taught to be with myself through the hard experiences and aspects of being human. I'm taught actually to externalize that and say, if you're good, I'm good. So I need to make it okay between you and I need to make sure you're okay, because if you're calm, then I'm calm. There's so many of these ways. And so when somebody comes to me, whether it's an individual woman or whether it's a couple who I also work with, so often getting to know ourselves, it starts with unraveling the threads around the codependent ways that we've been taught to relate to each other and to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because so often people will say, I don't even know what my wants, my dreams, my needs are. I've spent my entire life focusing external, focusing on the other person,
Right.
on the partner, on the kids, on the family, that I don't know who I am. So we kind of have to start there. And it's a process to start to back into who am I? What are my dreams? What are my passions? Right?
Right. Well, I love this because, you know, if the baseline and foundation of your work is that codependency, can we go into that a little bit and give people, you know, a little taster of, you know, I'm guessing your other book as well.
Yeah. I mean, because the other book was written, I co-wrote it with my partner. And so much of it is through this lens of how do we live as sovereign beings? How do we live in an, I am my own fully embodied self and you are your own fully embodied self. And what does that mean to love each other from that place rather than love each other through this more transactional place, which is I love you, which means you owe me this.
Yeah.
You need to meet my needs. You need to do these things for me, right? And if you don't, I will withdraw my love from you.
Yeah, and I think that is so huge because then, you know, that it can go into a whole slew of things, especially in motherhood.
That's
and,
right.
And your children as well at the same time.
Because we relate to them in the same way. Actually.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
I mean, this is it makes people cringe, but if I have been taught to relate to somebody through that transactional way, it's no different with my children than it is with my partner. And so this is where we see a lot of parents relating to their children through performance, right? Or through, I will love you when you're good, air quote good, right? I will love you when you are on your best behavior, when you are smiling, making me happy, right? And if you're not, then I'm going to cold shoulder. I'm going to, you know, tisk, tisk, tisk. I'm going to all these things that we do to our kids rather than say, you are who you are. Now, I'm not saying don't parent them, obviously.
Right.
We're going to guide them, but we don't own them.
Right.
They are not ours. They come through us, but they don't belong to us.
Right. And this whole idea of, you know, we want them to be fully expressed beings. And can they be safe enough to fully express themselves without, and you being the safety net without them having to always be happy or acting a certain way because they are going to have the fullest expression of their emotions. Can you still love them when they're rejecting you?
Can you still love them when they're screaming at you? Can you still love them when they're, you know, for a lot of us who are constantly overstimulated, right? Early motherhood.
When you're overstimulated.
Love that when you're overstimulated. But even in that, right? Like I actually use this, it reminded me, I use as an example in the book where I talk about being a human with my daughter too, and how important, again, going back to modeling, how important that is. And so I talk about this stuff with her. I have since she was very young, right? And I'm very realistic and I'm very human with her, where I will say stuff like, hey, you know, mom doesn't love when you pull on my neck like that behind me on the couch. I don't like that in my body. I really would like to sit next to you though. Will you sit next to me on the couch and hold my hand, right? Instead of that like internalized feeling where she then feels that and it feels like rejection.
Right.
I'm very clear with her. I don't like that. I love you.
I don't like that.
Can we sit together, right? It's modeling and teaching boundaries, really, is what it is, so that she can then do the same. I hope.
That's huge. That is so huge. You know, now what is the myth of the natural mother that you talk about? Do you think some women are actually not meant to mother in the way that society expects?
Yeah, I think some women are meant to not mother at all. Bottom line, I think that we've been taught that a woman's purpose on this planet is to procreate. And I think that a lot of us, if we're being really honest, probably had mothers or grandmothers or aunts, people in our lives that we can look at and say they probably should not have had children,
right?
But they didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that we live in a time where that is starting to be something that we can choose, right? And I have a lot of friends who have made that choice and are very happy with that choice. And I'm so happy for them that they're able to choose that, you know. And this is, again, not to shame anybody. It's just to say that this misogynistic view of women as we have to procreate, we're the natural born caretakers, which is nonsense, actually, right? If 50% of our population was the only part of the population that was able to caregive, our species would have died a long time ago.
That's true. Because we've all, I mean, in the collectivist societies, they've all
everybody chips in.
They did, yeah. They all
everybody, right? Yeah. And so I think we also have to be a little bit more comfortable with the discomfort of saying, no, I don't actually think it's inherent. So this concept of the natural born mother, it's going to be easy. It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to love my child right away. I'm going to feel this overwhelming sensation of gratitude. And that's not the case for many, many women. Yeah. And we have to stop shaming them for that.
And in your experience, have you found women who were just struggling the whole way in like that early stage of motherhood?
I have. And again, a lot of shame. They don't feel like they can tell anybody. They don't feel like they can be honest about it. And so they shove it down, and then it comes out in ways like resentment or passive aggressiveness.
Right. And we're just still passing it on to our littles. That's and right. I remember there was kind of like an early stage of motherhood where, you know, like, I don't know, with one of my kids, it was just like hard to lactate or just the breastfeeding and all of that. And I was like, oh my gosh, how come it's so easy for everyone? And I'm, you know, I live my life very open, and I'm like, hey, are you guys going through this thing too? Not a single person shared, you know, anything, or we're vulnerable or whatever. So I'm like, am I just like broken or what, you know? But then you see these memes online of like, you know, the memes have made it normalized. I mean, I don't know, for whoever was growing up without the time of internet,
oh my God,
how was it back then? Because think about it, so much shame that you had to live with by yourself. Now, maybe you say something, maybe your phone hears it, and then you're popped up with a meme and you're like, oh, okay, this is normal.
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm not.
Yeah,
you know.
God, I said breastfeeding was harder for me than any other component.
Yeah.
Mothering. Holy cow, was that hard?
Well, yeah. So let's talk about that shame, because I feel like shame and guilt are, you know, the two, you know, on the consciousness scale of emotions, one of the two lowest that we can experience in our emotionality. But then we're going through this very emotional time. And those are the two feelings that have been like hushed within the experience of motherhood. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So shame is interesting, right? Because shame as a social tool, shame is not all bad. And here's why I say that. Shame is really how we learn to live in a society, right? Brene Brown, I think she calls it like positive shame, right? There's a certain amount of shame that kind of teaches us the norms of our society, or teaches us, you know, if you hit someone, right, when you're little, and they stop being your friend, or they, you know, they walk away from you and you feel that immediate like, oh, in your body, there's a reason for that, right? And so shame really helps us stay on track sometimes in a society, right? It helps you learn, it helps you grow, it helps you reflect on things that you've done that you want to change and evolve, right? The problem is, though, is that shame is also used against us as well, right? Because it is such an effective tool, because you're right, it is one of the lower consciousness emotions. And so we've got to really be able to start picking apart, again, where and why. Like, why is this a shame that so many of us carry?
Yeah.
And I think for myself, but also for the clients I've worked with, when we start to realize it's bigger than us, when we start to realize shame is a tool that's been weaponized to keep us quiet, to keep us small, to keep us head down doing our duty, right? You start to look around and you go, oh, it's not me. That's just bullshit, actually. And you have a lot more, I guess, bravery behind like speaking up and, you know, saying the thing. This is nonsense. I don't feel ashamed for this, because I realize everybody else is going through this too. Yeah, it becomes more normalized. That's right. When we, you know, when it's not under wraps, when it's not hush hush, when, you know, it's not so much that secret anymore that we have to hide behind a rock, or, you know, pretend like everything's going okay, but it's actually not. And, you know, and I think with the work that you're doing, even with this book, you know, you actually uncover in this book talking about the Trinity Wound. Let's talk about that. And, you know, what is this? Because it's really, you know, your work is more than just motherhood. It's kind of our collective healing as women. And I want to speak to that too, because I feel like you're giving us some of the tools to question kind of the overarching theme, which I love. But yes, I haven't heard it talked about like this so much. So can you break down what is the Trinity Wound? Yeah, the Trinity Wound is the witch wound, the sister wound, and the mother wound. And so to kind of break those down, right? The witch wound is really this multi-generational, epigenetic, actually, trauma that has been passed down for the past few hundred years, right, generationally. And it's not just in those of us with European descent from the witch trials, but the witch hunts actually were extended so much further than Europe. A lot of us don't realize that witch trials spread through parts of Asia, Africa, South America. It impacted the indigenous women of North America, right? And actually are still happening to this day.
Wow.
In certain areas in the world, certain countries of Africa, for example, right? And so when I talk about the witch wound, there is research now around epigenetics, epigenetic trauma, right? Multi-generational trauma and how it's encoded in our DNA.
Wow.
So whether we're talking about the research that's done on, African Americans, right? Descendants of slavery, people whose families survived the Holocaust, we're starting to see how trauma is imprinted on the DNA of people.
Right.
And so it would stand to reason that those of us who have experienced not only personal persecution hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but also, having to turn on our mothers, our sisters, our friends, our aunts, having our mothers, sisters, friends, and aunts ripped away from us, right? Families being broken apart, women being murdered en masse, right? This is a trauma that we carry. And what that trauma tells us is don't be too loud, don't be too much, don't stand out too much, don't call too much attention to yourself, right? Don't be too unique, conform, right? Because if you didn't do all of those things, you were a target.
Right.
Then you have the sister wound, which is really this like women pitted against women, right? And so this is really through the lens of capitalism, which teaches us, right? It's power over.
Yep.
And so, humans over earth and animals, some humans over other humans. There's only so much pie to go around.
Yep.
We have to compete with one another. We have to keep each other down, right? So that's the sister wound. And then the mother wound is another, again, like generational trauma that's passed down, mostly through the maternal lineage, which is really around our own internalized patriarchy and misogyny. And I say this and it usually ruffles feathers, but I would say that women are some of the biggest upholders of patriarchy and misogyny that there are. And it's a survival tactic.
Okay.
Right? Again, we're not talking about it coming from a bad place. It is about survival. But I see it show up a lot in the way that mothers compete, for example, with their daughters, with their children in general, actually, not even just daughters, with the way that we don't hold men accountable for their actions, with the way that we start to shame our daughters when their sexuality and their beauty starts to come of age, right? There's all these kind of insidious ways that we keep these patriarchal notions intact. We, as in women.
Wow.
And it's passed down over generations of mothers, actually.
Wow. So it's almost like with the mother wound, that relationship that you had with your mom as well. And the almost subconscious like slightness that you felt.
That's right. It's that unconscious slightness. It's a really good way to put it.
So now in this Trinity wound, as you speak of this, I mean, I can think of so many things because we've all had that mother wound and even the sister wound. How does it for some people who are new to this? How does it and can it show up as we relate to each other as women?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point,
friendships
it's showing up everywhere, right? Yeah. I mean, when I was researching this chapter, I kind of put a poll out to my social media community asking for examples specifically of the sister wound as well as the mother, and the amount of examples that I got, right?
Oh my gosh. What were some of
and
the
I
most
listed
common?
a ton of them in the book. It's like waking up at a sleepover when you're 13 and hearing the other girls talking about you, female relatives all ganging up on another female relative, in the workplace, right? Like women kind of tearing down other women in order to get ahead. Just these ways that we as women compete with one another, right? Being jealous of or minimizing a woman's shine because you're envious, right? And it is baked in. I mean, we learn this so young that I think it's a responsibility of ours to question this stuff and start to ask ourselves, why do I feel the need to tear this woman down? Right? What does that say about me?
Yeah.
Not about her.
Right.
Right. And envy's fine. Envy is usually, and jealousy as well, is usually an indicator of something in your life, right? That you want or that you
secretly.
want to go for, right? But again, turn the mirror around on yourself. When you're focused external and you're tearing somebody down, I think there's a lot of work to be done when you look in the mirror.
Totally. And I think, Brave Table fam, as you're watching this or even listening to this on YouTube, I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, right? Not internalize or take personal or take it personally if you are experiencing something like this, but to actually poke the mirror and say, okay, it's probably not about you, it's about them. It's about the person that is actually sharing that. And, it's so easy to forget, because there is a lot of hurt around it.
That's right.
But also it's never about that. It's about, okay, well, the person who said it, stated it, started it, what is that for them?
Right. And what's that wounding? Right?
Yeah.
Where is that coming
wounding?
from?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's huge. So let's talk about rage. Rage in motherhood. Yeah. Oh, wow. That beautiful, beautiful time. Beautiful, beautiful time. What's the question that she's not asking herself?
That's a really good question. What is the question she's not asking herself? I mean,
if she's feeling rage in motherhood, what is she not asking herself yet?
I've never thought about that. What just popped up for me, and I might have to unpack this a little bit, is just the question, why? Right? And again, I guess this goes back to the whole reason I wrote this book, which is like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Right? And I remember when I was in the very beginning stages of writing this, I had a friend who had written a few books, and I said to her, God, there's so many directions I want to take this. I feel almost overwhelmed. And she gave me this advice where she said, write the book that you wish you had had when you were in the midst of it.
Right.
Right. And I was like, oh shit, it was such like an aha moment. But what brings, I don't know, rage is so interesting for me because as I started going into the research, what I realized is there's almost like two camps of motherhood books out there that I started finding. So that you've got this one camp, which is written by, a lot of therapists and psychologists, and they're super helpful and they give you a lot of tips and tools, but they felt very distant. And they also felt like they were putting all the ownership on the mom.
Yeah.
You have to learn to set boundaries. You have to learn to prioritize yourself. You have to learn to X, Y, and Z, right? So no understanding of the why. And then there was the other side, which was the rage side. So actual books like Mom Rage, for example, which are amazing books.
Right.
And I've read a bunch of them. But what I walked away from those books with was a lot of rage, but not a lot of what do I do with it now?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of these books were like, screw the system, screw the patriarchy. It was very like get up and rise.
Like advocacy.
Created rage, and then I just didn't know what to do with it. So I kind of felt like, how do I make a book that touches on both? That's like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I do bring out a lot of the rage in this book, but then I hopefully say to you, now what? Like, here's what to do with that, right? So God, I have so many thoughts around this idea of rage. Like, first of all, it's justified. I hear you. I still feel rage. I'm 5.5 years into my mothering journey and I still feel it. But I do ask why. And I try really hard not to focus it at an individual or at myself. But instead, like I was saying earlier, now I have this ability to focus it at the system. And then I ask myself, okay, what's my part in this? How can I dismantle some of this system? How do I, to your point, ask for help?
Yeah.
Because the system tells me not to. The system tells me that I'm not a good mother if I ask for help, that I'm not air quote super mom if I ask for help, right? And I say, well, screw the system. So what are the ways that I can say, screw the system, right?
Yeah, it's huge. It reminds me of, we had Nisha Moodley on the podcast. Nisha. And, there was a clip of hers that went viral. And we'll link her episode also in the show notes because I think it's also really relevant to what we're talking about here. But, she was going through a tough time and basically the clip was all about, and so I was vulnerable and I asked for help. And, she was kind of sharing her kind of woes of going into single, parenthood and raising, her babies. And so there was this point of, I am going through this season and I need help. And if you could watch, my baby for a couple of hours or drop off a meal or spend some time, I know I can get hired help, but I'm just looking for that village. And she was talking about, I think the reason why this clip went viral was, she was talking about how some of the comments that came in from her friends, or she thought that they were friends, or that came out later of people were like, well, why can't she just figure it out? Why can't she just do it on her own?
Sister wound.
Yeah. And even like, women, her friends who didn't have kids yet were like, why would you be asking that? And why can't, and they were judgy about it. And so, this is this whole clip, but it speaks to this, the sister wound, and it speaks to rage that I feel like a lot of women feel because they're secretly struggling or drowning. And they're like, oh my gosh, if they find out, what if? And it's like all of these societal expectations, which is why I think knowing, how did we get here? I feel like this book is going to be so enlightening for people, because it's like at any point in time, like you said, you can go against the grain.
That's right. This has been one of the hardest things. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about how I lost my home in the fires in California in January. Yeah. And of course, it's hard to lose all of your things, right? I mean, most of us left that night thinking we were coming home the next morning. So we took just the clothes on our back.
Wow.
So, of course, there's my grandmother's jewelry, and there's, that's the stuff that hurts. But it's not even about the stuff. The thing that has been the hardest for me has been the loss of that community that I feel like I took a lot of time to craft. And I say craft because what you're speaking to in Nisha's experience is so normal. And I feel like I took 5 years of really hard-earned discernment to know who my people were and really start to build that community, right? I had those mom friends or even friends who weren't moms, but were those friends that I knew there would be no questions asked. Send her over, right? Or I got you. And then it's unspoken that next week I've got her, right? And so to have that entire community wiped away, where we're all now displaced, and I feel like I'm back to square one again, where I'm really isolated, I'm in a new community, damn, I'm in another country, and I'm trying to rebuild that. It's devastating. And so I see women like Nisha, and I'm like, God, I feel you so deeply. But it takes work, and it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't, but it does. It does take work, and we have to do that work.
Yeah. We have to do that work to really find out who our people is.
Yeah, that's right.
And when we find them, it's so worth it.
Yeah. And we have to listen to the information being given to you by the people who are telling you that they aren't the ones.
Right. They're not your people.
That's
If they're going to question and judge and make a snide comment, maybe they'll come around later, but at this point in time, they're not your people.
That's right. God, that's right.
So I just want to round out like this chapter specifically, in your book around archetypes. And you kind of talk about archetypes as a map. So how can that understanding, the deeper in these archetypes really help us reclaim parts of ourselves?
Yeah. So
that we perhaps disconnected from.
Yeah. So I was mentioning earlier how depth psychology really is about, working with the language of the soul, the language of the unconscious, which again is metaphor and image and myth. It's not the language that we know, which is, more of our logical self. And so realizing that we as a species tell stories, right? Like we are a storied species. We understand ourselves through story. We pass down information and knowledge through story, right? A lot of what we know as our fairy tales and our myths now have been kind of crafted to become entertainment. Okay. And so let's just use Disney as an example. A lot of the stories that we know through Disney are stories that have been passed down for centuries.
Yep.
Right. And then Disney took them and tweaked them to make them more entertaining. Okay. Now, whether it was Disney or whether it was through, Hans Christian Andersen or whether it was through the Grimm brothers, who were not usually the originators of the story. Most of them took ancient myth ancient archetypal figures,
Right.
and then turned it into something that felt entertaining. The problem with that is then we lose the message. We lose what was actually meant as a map for us to understand, for us to learn from. So every chapter that I write, I have a section called Myths as Maps.
Oh, I love that.
And so I take either a form or a story that speaks to what I'm talking about in that chapter, and I go back through research and I say, what was the original story here?
Oh, okay.
Right? And what was the point? What was the message? What was the lesson or the learning we were supposed to get from this? Right? So for example, I've got, I don't know, I think 12, but the first one that comes to mind is The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We all know The Little Mermaid. We know Ariel. We know her beautiful singing voice. But where did that story originally come from?
Yeah.
Right? And so if you go all the way back to the origination of that story, it's really dark, as a lot of them are.
Yeah, I know. I know. You look at Disney movies and I was like, wow.
Oh, but Disney's not even dark. Go back in time and they're even darker.
Darker? Oh my gosh. Because I'm like, wow, Bambi lost its mom. Like, it was so sad.
Tragic.
So tragic. Lots of trauma. Okay.
I know. So let's use The Little Mermaid, right? So the original story of The Little Mermaid is similar in that she falls in love with a human, right? And she wants to be with this human. But the process through which she goes to become a human, in some accounts of the story, she has to cut out her tongue. In some accounts in the original version, actually, when she gets feet, right? She walks on, basically it's like walking on glass for all eternity, and her feet bleed.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And she goes through this process of pain and torture. The original version of the story, she befriends the prince that she's in love with, right? Same thing. He doesn't know who she is, all of that.
Right.
He loves her, but he loves her as one would love a pet.
Oh.
And so he has her sleep on a cushion outside of his door every night and prove her love for him.
Wow.
Prove her commitment to him. And she does this. And so there's all of these ways in this story where it's very clear that we're being taught to not lose your voice for another person, right? This idea of loving in a reciprocal way, not loving somebody who then treats you as though you are a pet, right? Because in the original story, he does end up marrying somebody else.
Yeah.
And she kills herself, right?
That's the original story.
That's the original story.
Okay, it's really dark.
And so, if we go back and we actually pull the thread and we say, what is the real lesson here?
Yeah.
What were these stories originally crafted to teach us? God, it's fascinating what we can learn.
Wow.
So my point is, number one, to give us those maps, but also number two, to just tell us, it's great to be entertained, but just question what you're taking in.
Yeah.
Because your psyche is still taking those lessons in. They're still embodying them. I mean, most of us watched Little Mermaid when we were, 6?
Yep.
That lesson was pretty deeply ingrained at 6 years old.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Which was give up everything for a man.
Yep.
Give up your family, your community, give up your voice.
Yep.
Right?
Give everything.
Get married at 16. That should be your ultimate goal.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's like same thing with Cinderella. It's
That's
like,
right.
okay, we're meant to find our Prince Charming.
That you've never met before.
Right.
By the way. You've had no interaction except for one night of dancing.
One night of dancing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. So, okay, now I want to get into and segue into like reclaiming our identity as mothers. Now we know better. We know how to question. We know kind of the powers at play. And I feel like your book does this really, really well, Motherhood Myth. But I don't think that we talk about this enough. And, this ego death that happens when you become a mom, and you talk about this ego death. And so for our audience, what does that ego death of motherhood feel like? And how can we move through grief and into something more whole?
So in the area of the book where I talk about ego death, I set it up that becoming a mother, becoming a parent is one example of a time in our life where we experience the death of the ego. And what I mean by that is a complete disillusion of who you were, right? Complete disillusion. Now, there are many other times in our life where we will have some kind of huge transition where there will be an ego death. For a lot of us, it happens with the death of a loved one. It happens when you lose your entire community in a fire, for example. Like there's many times in your life, right, where you essentially, the version of who you were dies, right? And there's an opportunity for you to be reborn. The thing is that I say opportunity and I kind of pause on that word for a reason, because you can become a mother. Having a child makes you become a mother. But do you actually integrate the learning and the lessons that are available to you to become the version of yourself, this new version of yourself, right? That is, to use your word, more whole, right? Not everybody does. You know, there's this archetypal framework around ego deaths, which is death. Then you have that darkness, that liminal space, right? So I'm not who I was, but I'm not yet who I will be.
Right.
And then you have rebirth. That rebirth comes from being in that darkness. It comes from really taking in and learning the lessons from that dark period, right? That liminal space. A lot of us want to skip through it. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's painful, there's grief. But if we skip over it, we actually miss out on the opportunity to integrate into a more whole version of ourselves, right? And so motherhood, again, is just one example of an opportunity, actually. Yes, it's hard and there's grief, and there's opportunity in that.
Yeah. We just have to be open and willing to take the call. And sometimes we don't.
Sometimes it's hard. And again, we don't have a lot of support.
Right. And sometimes you're just so swimming in kind of the chaos of motherhood that you just don't even know, or you're trying. You know, I feel like I resonate with this because I feel like for so long I wanted things to be normal. Like, yeah, I'm still going to go out with my friends and I'm still going to, you know, I'm just going to take the baby everywhere we go. And we did. We traveled, you know, to a lot of places as well. But I remember specifically, like so vividly, you know, we did this like walk. You know, my husband and I would do these walks, and we were living in LA. And so just like our nighttime walks, post dinner, you know, just go out and do our walks. And I remember, you know, and that was kind of our way to just like recap the day and for, you know, obviously for the first probably year, I was taking my son in its little, you know, carrier and just wearing him out on walks. And that, you know, made me feel, you know, a little glimpse of like, okay, whole. Not all the time, because there were some times where he was like crying and whatever. And, you know, nighttime routine was like 7:30 or 7 or whatever it was. But that was kind of the thing. And so there were times where I would get so sad and like even depressed of like, oh, well, can't do my walk, because by the time you get out, you know, you're just like so exhausted and nobody's there to watch them except for you. You know, like it's not like you're going to leave a monitor out and just leave and do your walk. Do you know, so it was, things had to change slowly. And I think a lot of times we try to hold on to the past and the old identity and try to keep everything normal, because change is scary. You are going to have a quieter life. Like I remember the year before that, we were traveling to different countries, like, you know, every year. And I would just look at my pictures like pop up, oh, you were in Thailand, or you were, you know, just like no children, obviously. And now you have this like slower pace of life. And I feel like for a lot of type A women who are so used to, or just like going, this really makes you pause and slow down. And so the ego death is big.
It's huge. It's huge. And I think we suffer more by not making space for it.
Yeah.
We suffer more by not honoring that there is grief and that we do miss versions of ourselves. And we do wish that we could take a walk by ourselves with our partner, right? And leave the kid behind.
Behind. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think a lot of this suffering around ego death is the clinging. It's the not allowing it, it's the not honoring it, and it's the clinging to, which is what you're speaking to. The clinging to the old self.
Yeah.
You know, let's honor it. Let's make space for the grief, and let's do our best to not cling to it, because you are not who you were.
Right.
Period. You're just not. You know, there are parts of you, obviously, that always exist and are, you know, continuous, but that version of you is gone. Just like the version of you before you lose somebody you love, right? I mean, there's always that part of you, but that version is gone. And we have to grieve that.
Yeah. Make the space for grieving.
Make the space for grieving.
So good. So now, so many women, I feel like, also feel like they've lost their intuition after becoming mothers. And why does that happen? And what's your advice for having them come back home?
Yeah,
So that their own inner voice.
I think this is something that, again, going back to the codependency work, I think losing connection with your inner voice, with your intuition, with your discernment happens to all of us very early on, long before motherhood happens. And it happens to men too. I mean, I think we lose connection to ourselves because we are a society that's built on external validation, external guidance, right? It's not about what you say, it's about what your parents say. It's not about how you feel, it's about what society feels, right? And tells you is normal and okay and acceptable. So I think the work of reconnecting to ourself is important, whether you're a parent or not. I think this is our journey as humans, is to come back to what that original version of intuition and self is. And to be tangible, I think a lot of times what I work with clients on is this happens in what I call the micro moments. So this concept of identity and intuition is lovely, but it can be a little kind of floaty for some people.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I talk about is, let's break this down to micro moments. So building a sense of self, capital S, self. I like to use the image of building a house. And you have to build a house brick by brick, right? You don't just wave a wand. And so let's say, for example, I'm somebody who struggles to say no or to set boundaries. And I'm starting to work on that, right? When somebody calls me and says, hey, can you do this thing for me? And I say, no, I can't because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm sorry, I'd love to do that, but I'm busy that night. When my initial response would have been yes. That might seem like something small. It's not. It's a micro moment, but that micro moment is a brick that you are laying on the foundation of that sense of self.
Yeah.
And so every time you do that, you're returning to who you are, what you desire, what your needs are, what your intuition is saying. You're teaching yourself that you will listen and respect yourself, that you will not self-abandon in those moments because your wish to be chosen is overriding your desire to come back to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So don't discount the micro moments. They're really important. It's part of building that sense of self.
Yes. Your wish to be chosen. That is huge.
The choose me wound.
The choose me wound. Yep. Oh, that's a big one. Yep. So, okay. Big question as we round out this and before we get into our Spill the Chai segment. What is your hope for the motherhood myth? And what do you hope that women can really, gain a sense out of for themselves?
I think my biggest hope for the motherhood myth is actually to be a doorway or a gateway into having conversations with partners, with friends, with family, because I actually think men could learn a lot from reading this book too. It's called The Motherhood Myth, but I don't know that this book is specifically for women. I think so much of this book was born out of my personal struggles and ahas, and through the really hard fought work that my partner and I did to start to unpack some of these patriarchal notions, some of these misogynistic practices that we just take as fact. Right. And so my real hope is that it opens the doorway for more honest conversations and more honest looks at ourselves, an ability to look in the mirror and say, what's my part in this?
Yeah.
How am I actively participating in propping up these systems that I'm saying I want to dismantle?
Yeah.
And just more honesty and less shame.
Yeah, and I love that so much because I feel like a lot of times our partners, they get lost in the mix. And I feel like they get lost in the mix. They don't know how to support. And then we're going through this big kind of hoopla, but from the birth, taking care of this little one. And the mom is doing most of that, 90% here.
Especially in the early days, right?
Yeah, in the early days. And so what can our partners do? And I feel like really understanding, and you break it down so well. Because if half the battle of understanding how did we get here is understood by the partner, then you have more open dialogue, communication, and more empathy and more compassion shared.
Right. What do we want to do differently?
Yeah.
Let's address this together. How do we want to tackle the change, right? Because we don't have to follow these blueprints, these myths just because they were given to us. We get to ask why, and we get to make different choices.
Yeah. and go against the grain.
That's right.
Now, as we get into our spill the chai section, I mean, you're having water today. What is one thing that you recall in your early days that you wish you had but didn't? Early days of motherhood.
That I wish I had.
Perhaps maybe it was a myth that you believed in.
I mean, I think two things. One, knowledge. Again, I feel like nobody talks about the stuff, right? Like we've talked about a bunch here. Like nobody says this stuff out loud.
Right.
I wish somebody had said to me, you're not a bad person for not liking the parenting side of this stuff. You know, it's not fun. Number one. And I think less shame. I mean, I think if I'd given myself more grace, I think that would be one thing. I wish I could go back and give myself more grace.
Yeah. To all the super moms out there who are struggling solo, you don't need to.
You don't need to. Oh, there's a section I actually call Superwoman or Supermom is not a compliment.
No, it's not a compliment.
Not a compliment. It's a term that is used to keep us over-functioning.
Stop
using it.
Doing everything, but then
being Supermom.
But everybody can see that you're drowning and you've got resentment and you're just performing. And you need help. So ask. Okay, what's the piece of advice, the one piece of advice that you'd give to new or future moms that you really wish somebody had told you?
Most of my friends who gave birth after me came to me because they knew they were going to get a real dose of honesty. I'm going to be real honest about motherhood and parenthood. I actually have a good friend of mine who is in her early 40s, and we had a long hike where we talked about this, and she was on the fence. And she said to me at the end, she's like, thank you for being so honest. She's like, because I feel like so many of my friends, and she's like, even my older female relatives were so, not wishy-washy, but they're so like, but it's so beautiful. And at the end of the day, it's like the greatest love you'll ever have. And she's like, and all these like platitudes, but nobody was really honest with her. And I think that I was able to say to her, I asked her, like, what's the thing that you love the most about your life? Like, you have crafted your life for 40 years, by the way.
Yep.
We're having children later now.
Yeah.
It's harder to let go of who we are.
Exactly.
We're more established than when we're 18, right? Or our parents. My mom was 21 when she had me.
Right.
And she said, I love my independence. I love that I get to make my own schedule. I get to travel. I get to drop whatever I'm doing on a whim. And I'm like, that will no longer be your reality.
Yeah.
She's like, well, like you, I get to travel with my kid. I said, that will no longer be your reality. I'm just here to tell you that if you're looking at me and you are telling me the number one thing you love about your life is your freedom.
Oh, yeah.
You need to really consider whether or not you truly want to have a child or if you're just considering it because you think it's what you're supposed to do.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's so big. Yeah.
I just wish somebody was honest.
Right. And it's, it puts so many things because sometimes it's just not, and that's okay.
That's okay. And I still would have had my child to be clear. Like if somebody had been honest, I just think I would have gone in with less misconceptions. I like reality. I'm a realist. I want somebody to say to me, it's not just the newborn years you're not going to sleep. It's 18 years you're not going to sleep.
Right.
Nobody told me that, Neeta. Nobody told me that.
18 years, I know. We're 6.5 years in, and my
Still not
6-year-old at night, I'm like, why are you still waking up in the middle of the night?
Every night you're in my bed. You are 5.5. What's happening?
I know, sister. I know. I get it. What is the wildest thing motherhood taught you about yourself?
Oh, just name one. I always knew that I was going to, and this sounds really, I guess maybe like really big. I always knew that I was going to heal many generational wounds. I think I knew that about myself very early on. I had this from very young, this like the buck stops here mentality. I never realized until having a child the level of like the fire that was lit under my ass, especially by having a daughter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where I not only would do it for myself, but doing it for her. So I don't know if that's something I learned about myself per se, but just like realizing that passion that I had in myself to rip apart all these blueprints, I didn't even know it could get bigger. And it did.
Wow.
It did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've gone on so many kind of, you know, pathways today, and you know, you're in this like intersection precipice of motherhood myth being out, and it's going to land in so many people's, you know, homes and transform so many different relationships. And I know that this year you were braving kind of losing your home. And how, as you walk into the season of, you know, this next book out, what are you braving now as we have this, I guess, new era, a new version of you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this whole year has been about braving something, right? I think I'm braving, I think I'm braving softness. I think I'm braving receptivity. I think I'm braving the unknown. And I think I'm braving groundedness. I think that's the few things, not the few, I mean, they're big, but coming out of this past, you know, 6 some odd months, a very trying and challenging time in life. You know, I'm birthing this book baby, but simultaneously dealing with everything else going on.
Yeah,
And
you had to move completely to a different country, losing everything.
but just like being open and receiving and being soft. I think that's something coming out of the fires that I'm really trying to brave my best.
Yeah. And what word would describe this season of life?
What word would describe this season of life? Grounded. As chaotic as the year started, and you know, and tumultuous as it's been, I think grounded, rooted. I think rooted in purpose more than ever.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for just blowing our minds with this conversation, giving us so much knowledge, and just, you know, I think there's so much that we kind of take for granted, and we're just kind of going with the motions, and you're dismantling all of that in this book. And I'm so excited for people to get their hands on it. And so people who are watching this right now, Vanessa, tell them where do they get the book? Where are they following you? Because you also have a robust social media as well. Tell us all of the things.
All the things. Website, vanessabennett.com. You know, I'm across all the platforms. Instagram, I'm probably the most active on, Vanessa S. Bennett over there. But yeah, I mean, I've got a community, I've got a coaching academy, I've got the book, I've got all the things happening because, you know, why not spin all the plates?
Of course.
Even though I said softness, I'm like, yeah, here's the 10 things I do. But yeah, come on over, check out the community. It's amazing. We've got a good thing going.
Amazing. And we'll link where to actually get the book. In the show notes. Is it vanessabennett.com?
Yeah,
and wherever books are sold.
Yeah, and if you do the pre-order, you know, I've got a book club coming out.
Amazing.
That I'll be doing along with it. So if you pre-order the book, you can hop in the book club.
All right, get in the book club.
That's right.
Wow, you are a plethora of knowledge, and I'm just so excited my community gets to learn from you. And I mean, just the amount of like resilience and love and care and passion that you've been able to exude just this whole year as your world has been kind of, you know, upside down. I just want to honor you for that. And thank you so much for being here, braving your story. And I know you're paving the way for so many other women.
I appreciate that. I'm so grateful. I'm just thank you for being here and having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, this was a long time coming, and I'm so glad we made it work. So glad. All right. Back to the other side. Vanessa is literally, I feel like I learned so much. It was like a master class of going deep and, you know, just really understanding why we've been doing things for so long and where that's coming from and the systems that actually hold us there. So if you're curious, maybe this is something for you and your partner. This is something for you and the girlies in, you know, your mom's group, you know, with your partners if you are actually pregnant right now or going to be soon having and welcoming another little one into your lives. I think that's a huge one. We talked about so many things, especially kind of, dismantling the motherhood myth, but also our ego death and what tends to happen. I feel like I resonated so much with what she was sharing. And back then I didn't have words for it. I mean, I kind of did. And, you just kind of blame it all on postpartum, but there's a reason for why we kind of shy away or not. And those reasons are really subconscious or even so much bigger than we really understand. And so she does such a great job of educating us. And so we can choose differently. You can call a friend today if you're struggling. You can, go next door to your next door neighbor, or be the one to reach out to the person in, your PTA or drop off line or in school, and hang around and get to know the other moms in your community, because creating community is such a vital stage of, building your family is huge. So I wish that for you. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please take a moment to hit subscribe, hit the like button. Let us know what you love the most. Follow Vanessa S. Bennett on Instagram. Follow The Brave Table or Neeta Bhushan. And I will link all of those in the show notes. I will link where you can get her book and where you can join her book club. The Motherhood Myth is out now everywhere. And thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time on The Brave Table. You know I've got so much more in store for you. So if you are really ready to dive in and keep owning your emotions like the boss that you are, click right here. Go ahead, don't be shy. I'll see you in the next one. Keep shining.